My parents didn't even register that I had moved out. Now, out of nowhere, my dad's threatening to stop paying for college, except I graduated 4 years ago. I'm the youngest out of 6 kids, and when I say youngest, I mean by a long shot. There's about an 8-year age gap between me and the next oldest sibling, and honestly, growing up, it always felt like I was kind of just there, like background noise. My brothers and sisters had their own issues going on, and I think my parents just figured that since I wasn't sick or dealing with mental stuff like the rest of them, I didn't really need much from them. I'm not trying to play the victim here or anything, but that's just how it was. The rest of them were constantly in and out of hospitals, therapy sessions, you name it. And me? I was just existing in the corner. They call it a glass child, right? The kid you can technically see, but no one really pays attention to. I guess that label fits. I was mostly okay with it, though. I spent a lot of time by myself, playing video games, reading, doing my own thing. I figured out pretty early on that if I wanted to have any fun or kill time, I'd have to figure it out on my own, because nobody else was really checking in. It's not like I was asked to take care of my siblings or anything. I've read stories where people had to give up their whole childhoods to look after their brothers and sisters, but that wasn't my situation. To their credit, my parents took care of all that themselves. But because I wasn't in constant chaos like the others, I just kind of got overlooked. I wasn't causing trouble, so I wasn't on the radar. I don't think they did it to be cruel or anything. I think it was just the natural result of having 4 kids with ongoing medical or emotional issues. When one of them is fine, that kid becomes the lowest priority. Their schedules were always packed with doctor appointments, school meetings, hospital runs, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I became the quiet kid in the background who didn't need anything and didn't get anything. It's not like I was invisible in a tragic, poetic kind of way. It was more like, we've got our hands full, and you're doing fine, so just keep doing that. But I wasn't completely alone. When I was around 7, I met 2 girls, Avery and Jasmine, who were pretty much in the same boat as me. Their home lives weren't much better, and somehow, without needing to say much, we just found each other. It was one of those instant connections where you don't need to explain yourself. We just got it. We understood what it felt like to be ignored, to be left on the sidelines, and that brought us close fast. Over time, they became more like family to me than the people I shared DNA with. We were practically glued together all through school, and we stayed close even after we graduated. We all went off to college together, finished our degrees side by side, and eventually moved to a different state as a group. It felt like we pieced together the kind of family we'd all been missing growing up, just built our own from scratch. As for my parents, we barely kept in touch after I moved out. I mean, honestly, we didn't really talk much when I lived at home either, so it wasn't a big shift. My mom would text once in a while, asking general stuff like how school was going or what job I had. It was all surface level, small talk kind of stuff. But to be fair, that was actually an improvement compared to high school, when we barely exchanged more than a few words a day. So yeah, I didn't expect much from them, and I learned not to ask for much either. What really drove home how disconnected we'd become was a phone call from my mom last year, just a few days before Thanksgiving. It was weird from the get-go, because we never call each other. So the second I saw her name pop up, I knew something was off. The last time I had heard her voice on the phone was probably a year before that, and that was just to tell me where and when one of my sister's funerals was happening. That's how little contact we had. Anyway, she calls and asks what time I'm planning to come for Thanksgiving. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait, what? Because I had zero clue they were even doing anything for it. It's not like Thanksgiving was a tradition in our house or anything. I can only remember maybe 2 or 7 times in my whole life where we actually made a real effort to celebrate it. So I told her I already had plans. I was going on a ski trip with Avery and Jasmine, and it's not like I could just cancel and show up last minute. I mean, I live 2 states away. A trip like that takes planning, plane tickets, and a decent amount of notice. But she acted like I was just being difficult for the hell of it. Then she hit me with the guilt trip, told me she'd be all alone because my dad was going to spend Thanksgiving visiting my brother in the facility he's in. That place is like a 2-hour drive from their house, so he was going to be gone most of the day. And look, I understood where she was coming from. I really did. But she gave me, 7 days notice? 3 days. And I was supposed to magically drop everything and come running to make her feel better? I told her I couldn't make it, and she got pissed. Started throwing accusations around about how I didn't care about the family or whatever. I repeated that I already had plans, and she hung up on me. After the call, I just sat there for a while. Part of me felt guilty, but another part of me was pretty angry too. Like, where had she been all this time? And now suddenly I'm the bad guy for not showing up for Thanksgiving? I even went back through our old messages to make sure I hadn't somehow missed something, but nope. Not a single mention of Thanksgiving. Not a word about wanting to see me. She just sprung it on me out of nowhere, like I was supposed to read her mind and rearrange my life on the spot. Later that night, I sent her a text. I told her I had a ski trip lined up for Christmas too, but that I'd be happy to catch up with her and Dad sometime after New Year's. Tried to keep it polite. She never responded. A few days after that whole Thanksgiving disaster, I was still feeling off about it. You know that weird nagging feeling you get when something's not sitting right? That was me. I couldn't shake how she tried to guilt-trip me like that, especially when she hadn't even told me about Thanksgiving in the first place. It's like they expected me to just magically know their plans and drop everything without warning. But I had mostly let it go by then. I was focused on getting ready for the ski trip with Avery and Jasmine. We'd been looking forward to it for months, and it felt good to have something to be excited about for once. It had been way too long since the 7 of us took a real break together. And then, completely out of the blue, I get a text from my dad. He almost never texts me, so I figured it had to be something serious. But instead, he hits me with this. If you don't come home for Christmas, I'm cutting off your college payments. I actually laughed when I read it. I mean, seriously? I graduated 4 years ago. What payments is he even talking about? I was so thrown off. I had to reread the text just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding something. For a second, I honestly thought he must have mixed me up with one of my siblings or something. So I replied and reminded him nicely that I already finished college. And if he seriously believed he was still footing the bill for my education, then he might want to take a look at his bank statements, because someone was clearly scamming him. I figured that'd be the end of it. I thought once he realized I wasn't in school anymore, he'd feel a little dumb and drop the whole thing. But nope. A few hours later, he sends another message. This time, it's full of accusations about how selfish and ungrateful I am. He went off about how much he and Mom had given up for all of us kids, and how I didn't appreciate any of it. First off, I never once asked them for anything. Not now, not ever. And second, my college? That was all paid for by Grandma. She made it clear from the beginning that she didn't want my parents involved in my education. She handled the entire thing herself, every last cent. So whatever my dad was ranting about made absolutely no sense. At that point, I was starting to get pretty annoyed. I get that life's been tough for them dealing with everything going on with my siblings, but trying to guilt-trip me over stuff they didn't even do? That's a whole new kind of messed up. I kept it civil and shot back a text saying something like, "Sorry you feel that way, but Grandma paid for my college. I've already got plans for the holidays, but I'd be happy to catch up after New Year's." I thought that would finally put a lid on it. But instead, my dad kicked it into high gear with the dramatics. Suddenly, I was abandoning the family, turning my back on them, and he was done helping me if I wasn't willing to put in the effort. I sat there just staring at my phone like, what even is happening right now? Abandoning the family? Really? I've been living on my own for years, and they barely even noticed I was gone. Now, just because I'm not canceling my life to run home for Christmas, I'm some kind of traitor? Part of me wanted to just ignore it. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. They hadn't checked in on me in months, hadn't asked how I was doing, hadn't cared what was going on in my life, but now that they needed something, suddenly I was supposed to swoop in and make everything okay? Like I was their emotional backup plan or something. I called Avery and Jasmine just to get it off my chest, and they both basically said the same thing, that my parents were just trying to use me to ease their own guilt. Avery said they probably didn't even care about spending time with me, they just didn't want to feel bad about themselves. Jasmine, being Jasmine, didn't sugarcoat a thing. She said flat out, "Screw them. You don't owe them a damn thing." I figured I'd sleep on it before responding again, cool down a little first. But as I'm lying there, trying to unwind, my phone lights up again. It's another message from my dad. Short, cold. He says if you're not coming home, don't bother coming back at all. And man, I just felt completely hollow reading that. Like, seriously? How did we go from radio silence to disowning me over a holiday visit? It didn't even feel real. I sat there staring at that message for the longest time. A part of me wanted to fire back with every painful memory, every time they ignored me, every time I felt like a ghost in that house. But I didn't. I set the phone down, rolled over, and tried to sleep. I didn't want to get dragged into a full-blown family meltdown right before Christmas. I wasn't about to wade through guilt trips and accusations when I'd finally started feeling some peace. So I just left it. The next morning, I woke up to a fresh batch of texts, this time from my mom. She didn't go off like my dad. Her messages were more disappointed, I guess. She said they didn't understand why I was being so distant, that they hoped I'd reconsider. And all I could do was laugh because distant? That barely scratched the surface. I'd been emotionally checked out for years. They were just now realizing that? I didn't reply. I focused on packing for the ski trip. Avery and Jasmine were hyped, and honestly, so was I. It felt like the perfect escape from all the guilt and chaos. We hit the road the next day, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about my family. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel torn up inside. I just felt free. But of course, that peace didn't last long. Right in the middle of the trip, I get another message from my mom. She wasn't letting it go. She said if I didn't come home soon, they'd have to start making decisions about the future without me. And something about that wording hit me different. It clicked. This wasn't about Christmas. This wasn't about some holiday get-together or missing me. They were planning something bigger. Maybe something to do with one of my brothers. Or maybe it had to do with the house, or some kind of legal stuff. I didn't know exactly. But suddenly it made sense why they were pressing so hard. It wasn't about me being there for the holiday. They needed me back in the picture for whatever they were plotting. I wasn't a person to them, I was a piece of the plan. And that realization hit hard. I'd spent all this time thinking maybe they just missed me. Maybe they were lonely. But no, it wasn't love. It wasn't connection. It was about control. It was about what I could give them. And in that moment, I was just done. After everything, the texts, the guilt, the threats, I figured it would blow over eventually. I ignored them, went on the ski trip, tried to remind myself that I had my own life, my own goals, and I didn't need to get sucked back into that mess. But of course, life had other plans. I had just gotten home, barely back into my routine, when I got a message from my older brother, Dylan. We hadn't talked in months, maybe longer. Growing up, Dylan was the one I thought might actually get me. He wasn't as sick as the others, so I always thought we could have been closer. But he was always off doing his own thing, caught up in his own world. Still, seeing his name pop up surprised me. His message was short. Hey, we need to talk. I didn't know what he wanted, and I wasn't exactly itching for more family drama, so I just texted back about what. A few minutes later, my phone started ringing. It was Dylan. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me, so I picked up. Before I could even get a word out, he jumps right in. Mom and Dad are talking about making you the legal guardian for one of the boys after they're gone. And I swear, I almost dropped the phone. My heart was pounding, and for a second, I just sat there, completely stunned. Was this seriously happening? After all these years of barely acknowledging I existed, they now expected me to carry the weight of this? Like they could just hand me this massive responsibility out of nowhere? What are you even talking about? I finally managed to ask, my voice tight. Dylan let out this sigh like I was the one being difficult. You know how things are with Mom and Dad, he said. They've got a lot going on with the other boys, and they're not going to be around forever. They need to know someone's going to step in when they can't anymore. I could feel my jaw clench. Seriously? They think I'm the one who's going to take this on? After being pushed to the sidelines my entire life? After all the guilt trips, the silence, the emotional cold shoulders? And now, suddenly, I'm their chosen one? Dylan didn't seem to understand why I was so pissed. Look, he said, I know it's a lot, but you're the only one who's really got their life together. I almost laughed at that. Of course I've got my life together. I had to, because no one else ever gave a damn. Maybe you all should have thought about this earlier, I snapped. Because I sure didn't know this was even on the table. They were going to bring it up to you, he said. I just figured you should hear it from me first before they tried to drop it on you. I was furious. This wasn't about a holiday dinner anymore. This was something much bigger, and they'd been scheming behind my back without even the decency to clue me in. Years of silence, and now they expected me to come in and pick up the pieces? So let me get this straight, I said, still trying to process. They've been planning all this behind closed doors, and just decided I'd be the one to handle it? No conversation? No warning. Dylan didn't even try to deny it. Yeah, pretty much. It's been in the works for a while. I sat there in silence, just staring blankly at the wall like it could somehow explain any of this to me. I wanted to scream. Not really at Dylan, he was just the messenger, but at the whole situation. This wasn't a favor. This wasn't helping out for a weekend. They were asking me to reshape my entire life to fix the mess they'd created. And after everything? After being invisible for so long? No, not happening. So what? I'm supposed to drop everything? I said, my voice low and bitter. Give up my job, my life, my plans, and just move back like nothing else matters? Dylan didn't have an answer for that. He started talking about how hard things were for Mom and Dad, how they were barely managing everything with our brother's care, how they were overwhelmed. I didn't care. I spent my whole life watching them prioritize everyone else because they were struggling, while I quietly held myself together. Now, suddenly, because I wasn't a disaster, I was expected to carry it all? I'm not doing it, I said flatly, cutting him off mid-sentence. I'm not going to be their backup plan. They ignored me for 30 years, and they don't get to show up now acting like I owe them something. Dylan went quiet for a second. Then he said, I get it. I really do. But you're still family. That word family, it made something in me want to scream. Yeah, I was family. When it was convenient. When they needed something. When I was a kid, they didn't check if I was okay. Didn't ask how I was holding up. But now that the future looks scary and uncertain, suddenly I'm the golden ticket? Tell them I'm not interested, I said coldly. And don't call me about this again. Before he could say anything else, I hung up. I sat there for a while, just staring at my phone, trying to calm the storm building in my chest. It felt like everything had been leading to this moment, where I finally hit my limit. No more guilt. No more being manipulated. No more being the forgotten kid who suddenly had to save the day. I wasn't going to let them make me the net that catches their fall. Days went by without a word from Dylan or my parents. It felt like they were just waiting. Waiting for me to break, to come crawling back, to suddenly become the good daughter they'd always ignored but now needed. But I wasn't budging. I wasn't about to let them offload their responsibilities onto me just because I was the only one left standing. Then a letter showed up in the mail. A letter. No phone call, no voicemail. Just a piece of paper like we were living in some historical drama. It was from my mom. And the letter? It was a long, rambling guilt fest. Full of the same emotional manipulation I'd been hearing all along. She talked about how much they needed me. How hard things were. How they didn't know what they'd do if I didn't step up. But the part that really got me, the part that made me see red, was at the end. She wrote, "We're not asking for much, Lauren. We just need to know that when we're gone, someone will step up for the family. That was it. That was the moment it all clicked into place. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about missing me. It wasn't about rebuilding a relationship. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could do for them. I was a convenient solution. A neatly wrapped safety net. I was the only one who hadn't completely fallen apart, so naturally I became the go-to option. I crumpled up the letter and tossed it in the trash without a second thought. I was done. Update 1. After that letter, I thought, okay, this is it. I've finally reached my breaking point. They'd thrown every guilt trip in the book at me. Tried every angle. I figured that had to be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. Not even close. A week or two later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I was going to let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to know who was still trying to drag me back in. Hey, Lauren. It's Hannah. Hannah, one of my sisters. We were never close. Not even remotely. Growing up, she was constantly dealing with her own stuff. Hospitals, therapists, treatments. I felt bad for her, sure, but I barely knew her. We were like two strangers sharing a roof. So hearing her voice now felt strange. Hey, I said cautiously, not sure what she wanted. She jumped right in. Look, I know things have been kind of rough between you and Mom and Dad, but I really need you to hear me out. I could feel my stomach drop. Here it comes, I thought. More guilt. Another plea to be the family savior. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone even. She took a deep breath. They're not doing well. Like, really not doing well. Dad's health is getting worse fast. And they're panicking. No one's stepping up to help with the boys. They're scared, Lauren. They don't know what to do. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't care, because I did in a way. I didn't want to see anyone, not even my parents, fall apart completely. But after all the years of silence, all the times they looked right past me like I was furniture, I couldn't just swoop in and fix their mess. I wasn't their emergency patch kit. I'm sorry to hear that, I said slowly, choosing my words. But I can't just drop everything. I have a life too, Hannah. She let out a heavy sigh, and I could hear the frustration in it. I get it, but you're literally the only one who's in a position to help. Dylan's barely holding it together. And you know what things are like with me and the others. There's no one else, Lauren. They're desperate. They're desperate because they ignored this for years. I snapped, the anger finally spilling over. They let everything pile up, hoping it'd magically disappear. And now that I've actually managed to build a stable life, it's my problem? That's not fair, Hannah. I know it's not fair, she said quietly. But this is the reality now. They need help. And there it was again, the same tired script. The emotional strings they always tried to pull. No matter how far I ran, no matter how hard I tried to build a separate life, they always found a way to pull me back into their chaos. I could feel the pressure bubbling in my chest, years of resentment rising like steam under a lid. I'm not doing it, I said, sharper than I intended. I'm not going to be the one cleaning up their mess. They didn't give a damn about me when I was a kid. They don't get to come knocking now just because it's convenient. I get it, Lauren. I really do, she said, and I could tell she meant it. But this isn't about you or me anymore. This is about the boys. About what's going to happen to them when Mom and Dad are gone. If we don't step up, who will? That hit different. Not because I suddenly felt responsible, but because it reminded me how trapped we all were. My parents had boxed us in, slowly, over years. And now they wanted me to be the key that fixed it all. And my siblings? They were caught in the middle of the same trap, too exhausted, too broken to fight back. I'm sorry, I said again, quieter this time. But I can't. I won't. There was a long silence. And in that pause, I felt the full weight of her disappointment. But I didn't budge. I couldn't. Okay, she said finally, voice flat. I'll tell them. Then she hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there holding my phone, just staring at the screen. My chest was tight with this weird mix of relief and guilt. I knew I didn't owe them anything, but it still stung, watching my family crumble and knowing I wasn't going to be the one to save it. Or maybe I could, but I finally chose not to. A few days passed. Then another letter came, this one even nastier than the last. No, hi, no, how are you? My mom dove straight into the guilt, line after line about how disappointed she was in me. How I'd let everyone down. How she couldn't believe her daughter would turn her back when the family needed her most. She went on about all their sacrifices, how hard their life had been, how ungrateful I was. And for a second, it worked. That old guilt crept in, just like it used to. The familiar ache in my chest, the whisper that I was somehow wrong for wanting to live my own life. But then I remembered. I remembered all the birthdays they forgot, all the nights I cried myself to sleep without a single check-in, all the times I needed them and they were too busy, too distracted, too indifferent. This letter wasn't about needing help. It was about control. It was about reeling me back into their world, where I owed them, where I was never enough, and where everything always ended up being my responsibility. But not this time. Not anymore. I crumpled the letter and tossed it in the trash, just like the one before. That was it. I was done playing the role of their pawn. I was done letting them pull my strings. I had my own life now, and I wasn't handing it over just because they finally realized they'd burned every other bridge. The next day, I blocked their numbers. Mom's, Dad's, Dylan's too, just to be safe. It wasn't easy, but it was the only choice that felt right. I couldn't keep letting them sink me, dragging me into their storm and calling it family. They made their bed. Now they had to lie in it. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt free. Update 2. Blocking them was like cutting a weight loose from around my neck. For the first time, maybe ever, I wasn't waiting for the next emotional ambush. No more guilt-tripping texts. No surprise calls from Dylan. Just quiet. Peaceful. But peace doesn't last long in my world. 2 weeks later, there was a knock at the door. Totally unexpected. I figured it was a delivery or maybe a neighbor. But when I opened it, there she was. My mom. Standing on my doorstep like this was some casual puppin. Like she hadn't burned the whole bridge behind her. I don't even know how she found my place. I hadn't gone off the grid exactly, but I wasn't advertising either. She looked different. Older. Worn out. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe life had finally caught up with her. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She didn't answer at first. Just looked at me like she wasn't sure who I was anymore. Finally, she said, "We need to talk, Lauren." I let out a slow breath. No, we really don't. I've said what I needed to say. I made my decision. She took a step forward, like she thought she could just walk right in. I moved into the doorway, blocking her path. I wasn't about to let her come in and make this a scene. "Please, just hear me out," she said, her voice softer now. "Your dad, he's getting worse. He's been in and out of the hospital. We don't know how much time he has left." I don't know what to do, Lauren. And there it was. The final card she'd been holding, the "your father is dying" card. She didn't say it in those words, but I heard it loud and clear. And no, I'm not heartless. I don't want my dad to suffer. I don't want anyone to. But after everything they'd put me through, after all the emotional gymnastics and years of silence, I couldn't just erase all that and show up like nothing happened. "I'm sorry," I said, voice low but firm. "But this isn't mine to fix. You and Dad had years to figure this out. You don't get to show up now and expect me to save the day." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "I'm not asking you to fix anything," she said. I need you to be there. For the family." "For the family?" I repeated, nearly laughing. "What family are we talking about here? The one that ignored me for 25 years? The one that only remembers I exist when they need something?" I shook my head. "That's not a family, Mom. That's emotional blackmail." Her eyes went wide, like she didn't expect me to call it out so directly. For a second, I thought she might snap back, defend herself like she always did. But instead, she started crying. Right there on my doorstep, my mother, this woman who barely acknowledged me most of my life, just broke down in tears. And I froze. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't going to let her in. But I also couldn't just shut the door and pretend I didn't see her fall apart like that. Look, I said, softer now, trying to keep my own voice steady. I get that this is hard. I'm not heartless. I know this must feel like everything's falling apart. I paused. But I'm not your safety net. I'm not the one who's going to fix decades of mistakes and make it all better. You made choices, Mom, and now you have to face what came from them. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked up at me, and I saw it shift. The tears started to dry, and that old familiar look of anger took their place. We did the best we could, Lauren, she snapped. You have no idea what it was like. Raising all of you. Dealing with the chaos, the hospitals, the breakdowns. We didn't have time for you because we were too busy trying to keep your brothers alive. There it was again. The excuse. The same tired defense I'd heard 100 times. And that's not my fault, I said, voice firm now, no hesitation. You chose to have 6 kids. You chose how you handled that. You chose to turn all your attention to everyone else and pretend I didn't need anything. That wasn't on me. That was you. I stared her down. And now? Now you're trying to guilt me for the consequences of your own decisions. I'm not doing it, Mom. I'm done. She stood there silently for a long time, just watching me like she didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe she didn't. Maybe in her head, I was still that quiet, obedient kid who never made waves. The one she didn't have to worry about. The one she could ignore without pushback. But I wasn't that kid anymore. Not even close. Finally, she spoke. So that's it, she asked, voice hollow. You're really just going to walk away from all of us? I shook my head slowly. No, Mom. You walked away from me a long time ago. I'm just finally walking in the other direction. She didn't argue. Didn't defend herself this time. She just turned and walked back to her car like the conversation had physically drained her. I stood in the doorway and watched her go. And the weirdest thing? I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Like I had finally dropped this heavy, invisible burden I'd been carrying for years. A weight that had never been mine in the first place. Once she drove off, I went back inside, sat down on the edge of the couch, and just exhaled. Let the silence settle around me. I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just done. Done with the guilt. Done with being manipulated. Done with always being the forgotten child until they needed a favor. I wasn't going to be their plan B. I wasn't going to be the one they turned to just because everyone else had collapsed. I had my own life. And I wasn't giving it up for people who only ever saw me when they wanted something. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. No calls. No texts. No letters. Nothing. And honestly, it was the most peace I'd felt in a long, long time. I focused on work, on Avery and Jasmine, on the life I had built on my own. No drama, no guilt weighing me down. I wasn't living under their shadow anymore. I wasn't checking my phone every 10 minutes, bracing for the next emotional ambush. I was just living. And then, about a month later, I got an email. Not from Mom, not from Dad. It was from Dylan. Just a few short lines. Dad passed away last night. Thought you should know. I stared at the screen for a long while, not really sure how to feel. It wasn't a shock. I'd known it was coming. But the weird part was, I didn't feel anything. No grief. No tears. Just nothing. I thought about replying. I thought about asking how Dylan was doing, maybe offering some kind of sympathy, maybe even going to the funeral. But I knew where that road led. Right back into the cycle. Right back into the guilt, the manipulation, the expectations. And I wasn't going to do that again. I closed the email without replying and went back to what I was doing. Because I wasn't part of that world anymore. And for once, I was truly okay with that.